Just running around here crazily in the weather department. I do apologize, but we're here for Coffee Talk. We do this every day, 7 days a week, hurricane or not, chatting about what's going on in the world of weather. But certainly there's more pressing issues today because we've got Hurricane Ian continuing to barrel down little by little on the peninsula. So over the next about hour or so, we're going to talk about all the data. We're going to be discussing the scenarios, and I want to make sure you know we're going to be doing so in an absolute no-hype scenario, all while drinking some coffee. Or in my case, coffee substitute together. So there's a look at the scenario as it stands right now. Center of circulation has been over Cuba since about 4:30 this morning when it made landfall. Important to note that seemingly the Cuban government gave permission for the hurricane hunters to continue investigating, and they did not find much weaker storm as they dropped dropsons over the island. Now, it is still over land, but over the next, I would say, probably hour to 2 hours time, this is going to lift off of Cuba, back out over not only the very warm waters, but also the loop current waters. You're talking very, very warm condition. So because of that, we are going to be discussing the concerns here because, yes, those folks getting battered this morning. Up next, though, is going to be the Florida Peninsula. All right, so the 8 o'clock information does not have it any weaker. 125 mile per hour sustained winds with gusts even higher than that. The forecast from the National Hurricane Center, okay, let's just take it through time. Lifting from Cuba and expecting it to get even stronger, okay? There's Wednesday early morning, still off of the southwest coast with winds of 130 miles per hour. Kellyanne, if you get a second, could you just tweak those times on the county by county? If not, I'll do it afterward.
I was listening, sorry.
To the Wednesday night.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there's Wednesday, 2 a.m. sitting just off of southwest Florida. Then coming ashore Wednesday afternoon into the evening, okay? 8, 9, 10 o'clock as a Category 3 storm. And then at that point, weakening as it moves over our area, okay? Now, I've had a lot of people asking me, what does that mean for us? Here's the forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center. Keep in mind, over the course of the next 12 to 24 hours time, that cone is going to shrink. What is going on? It's because I'm not getting any sleep. That cone is going to shrink as we get into the more finer points of the Hurricane Center's forecast. But according to the National Hurricane Center, by 2 p.m. on Thursday, the storm system should be somewhere essentially around the four corners of the area, right? Somewhere in this vicinity here. From there, continues moving through to the metro and weakening to a tropical storm. But you're still talking about sustained winds. You know, this is the thing that really gets me going. Even a tropical storm has sustained winds of 65 miles an hour, which that is the equivalent of a severe thunderstorm. That is the equivalent of damaging winds. So no matter what the scenario here, we are talking about damaging winds, okay? So there's a lot to discuss. Let's just get to when does it get bad, okay? When do you start seeing the weather really turning, okay? Here's the best product for that. Say Tampa area, southwest Florida, Wednesday morning, that's when the weather starts to get bad. Into most of the metro, it's more Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening. And then our northern areas, early Thursday morning, okay? So with this, let's talk, okay? Parent to parent. It's messaged toward the parents. Tomorrow, plan on sleeping as far away from doors and windows as you can. Plan on sleeping with the kids in the most protected area, okay? Depending on where you live, we could be talking about some pretty significant winds, but most importantly, the worst of the weather is going to be moving in Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, overnight into Thursday, all right? We're dialing it in, and that is so vital. That is such a key component to this, okay? Okay, what kind of winds could we be talking about? This is kind of the peak wind potential based on all the data that we have. The idea is Our western counties, so Claremont, Groveland, Bay Lake, Bushnell, Lake Pennsauken, Wildwood, we could be talking 75, 85, even 95 mile per hour winds. That purple highlighted area. Marion County, so Ocala, Bellevue, Denellen, Ocala National Forest, Astor, Northern Lake County there, Forest Hills, Howey in the Hills in that red, 55 to 75 mile per hour winds. That includes the Orlando metro area. That includes Kissimmee. That includes Poinciana. That includes Champions Gate. For areas highlighted in orange: Palm Coast, Flagler Beach, Daytona Beach, DeLand, Orange City, DeBary, Sanford, Oviedo, Winter Springs, Winter Park is kind of on the border there, Union Park, Avalon Park, University of Central Florida, Bithlo, Wedgefield, back over toward Titusville, Mims, Cocoa Beach, Merritt Island, Melbourne. We're looking at 45 to 55 mile per hour peak winds for you, okay? So I think that these products are going to be the things to truly drive home. The further west you live, we're really looking at the majority of the impacts, okay? Deb's asking, good morning from New Smyrna Beach. Good morning to you. What about Crystal River? So for Crystal River, you're talking about 55, 65, 75 mile per hour winds for sure, okay? So that's kind of where we're at. What about timing? What about local wind gusts? I want to get into our Futurecast model to try and dial that down, and then I will take your questions. And really, I want to, as quickly as I can, open Coffee Talk up to your questions. And we'll also do some county by county forecasts, okay? Here's a look, Futurecast 5, 6, 7. Today, it's just some showers, some little feeder band showers moving through. 4 a.m. tomorrow, you can see some of those more intense bands, but overall, it's not a bad day. 2 p.m., that's where we're starting. That's where we're starting to see the weather go downhill. 6 p.m., this is exactly what we talked about. 6 p.m., feeder bands increasing, core of the storm marching in. Here's 11 p.m., okay? This is the meat and potatoes of the storm system, okay? Those bright reds, that is very, very heavy rainfall. That's the torrential downpours. Those are the winds running to 70, 80 miles per hour, okay? 90 miles per hour with gusts in that vicinity. And it's all going to depend on a subtle shift left or a subtle shift right in terms of who gets even more impacts, okay? But there you go. The I-4 Metro seems to be getting, at least according to our Futurecast model, the core of the storm, okay? Then here's 3 a.m. watching that core. If you were to draw the eye, now the eye, very similar to Charlie, but the eye would be filling in at this point. But the eye of the storm, according to our Futurecast model, is right there, is right over like East Lake Toho. Okay, that's our Futurecast model. Now the GFS, the European, they do show some differences, but that's our Futurecast model, and we're going to be deep diving into the models as well. Watch by 8 o'clock Thursday morning, the core moving up. The center of circulation would be somewhere around New Smyrna Beach, Daytona Beach, Ponce Inlet. Well north, though, those impacts being felt all the way up to Flagler, all the way through Volusia. And then on the backside here, 3 p.m. Thursday, clearing out and continuing to clear out and continuing to clear out. So, okay, let's get into some of these impacts, okay? We're going to go somewhat county by county. I'm going to mention a bunch of counties. You're not going to hear yours when I say it because that's just the way that luck draws. Okay, let's start in the Orlando metro area and we'll work out and away. Orange County, 9 a.m. tomorrow is when you start to get your feeder bands. But truthfully, it's going to be more tomorrow night that you get those major impacts, and that continues through Thursday, clearing out through Friday. We're opening up this window on the worst weather there just because that's the one element that has not yet been completely dialed in. But max gusts, 50, 60, 70 miles per hour, could see several gusts a little higher. Once I'm done with the counties, then we can start taking your questions, okay? Here's Seminole County, all right? Feeder band starting tomorrow morning, but the worst of the weather starting really tomorrow tomorrow night into the overnight, 8 to 12 inches of rain around. All right, let's go to Osceola County. Let's see. We're going to start in the metro and we'll work our way out. Okay, for Osceola County, worst of the weather really getting going tomorrow night. And I'm going to tweak these graphics to just focus in on the worst because I think some of the newer model data is clearing that up just a little bit. Okay, 8 to 12 inches of rain. The severe weather risk is there for you. Let's head over to our coastal counties. Okay, Flagler, Volusia, Brevard County. Okay, 6 to 12 inches of rain possible in our northern spots there, 4 to 6 inches of rain possible in our southern spots. Now to our western counties. These are the counties that I think are going to have the majority of the impacts, okay? 8 to 12 inches of rain possible for us in Sumter County. Winds gusting 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. Could even see some higher gusts for you based on some of those most recent trends. Ian is moving through Lake County with winds running 8 to 12 inches. Very heavy rainfall. Gusts running 70 to 80 miles per hour. And then Marion County, my friends, very concerned with flooding rains. And because your soil is already so wet, I'm very concerned about trees coming down, okay? 6 to 12 inches, tropical storm watch posted for you, gusts running strong tropical storm force, okay? In terms of storm surge, this is a very big concern for our Gulf Coast friends. Take a look, especially in Tampa Bay. That storm surge there anticipated to be a 5 to 10 foot rise in water and then breaking waves on top of that, okay? For Sarasota County and the Sun Coast, it's more of a 5 to 8 foot water rise. For Tampa, for Pinellas County northbound through about the Big Bend, we're looking at a 5 to 8 foot water rise, okay? So that's kind of what we're looking at right now, okay? We'll look at model data. I'm sure people are going to be asking, so we'll reference that as you ask plenty of questions. Okay? Okay. You said Melbourne, Eric Burris. What about Palm Bay? Same thing as Melbourne. You're a few minutes away. Okay. I guess Palm Bay and Melbourne will have to just decide for themselves. Ridiculous. Speechless, truly speechless. Melbourne and Palm Bay are not that different, okay? So you're like a couple of minutes apart. When we get into the specifics of Melbourne versus Palm Bay, that's now casting, we're not quite to that point in the forecast, okay? For those of you asking about Osceola County, or excuse me, about Polk County, technically you're not in the WESH 2 coverage area, so we don't put a forecast together. Your forecast for Polk County is going to be almost identical to our forecast here for Osceola County. So winds gusting 55, 65, 75 miles per hour, okay? All right. Will the 11 a.m. advisory have a better idea on landfall? I mean, frankly, I think that we've really done a great job of dialing this in. You know, it may not be exact, but like, here's the overall forecast. This is the forecast cone, and here's the, there's the forecast models. I'd say we've got this pretty well, from Tampa down to Fort Myers. I think we've done a really good job of getting into this, okay? Crystal, is it worth bringing items in from the patio? Yeah, I would say so. It really and truly, my plan today after work, this is my last day that I get to be home because I think tonight, Kellyanne and I were just discussing, we're going to have to sleep at the station. And I think that that's kind of the vast idea for most of the WESH folks is having to sleep at the station, because looking through the kind of process here, yeah, I think that tomorrow night is going to be the worst of the weather. And again, that times out perfectly based on this product that we've been showing. So, I think tomorrow night is when the worst of the weather really starts in, okay? And so be where you're going to be tomorrow night. Do you think Marion County will get hit a little harder than we did with Irma, Brooke is asking? Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. There's still just some things, there's still just some things that we don't know for sure and will have to play out. Kelly, when does 24-hour coverage start? What should we tell them? right now?
4 a.m., yes, this morning.
4 a.m. this morning? Yeah, I'd like to say I think we're probably in it. It's not for sure, but I'm not seeing the Today Show on TV, so I'd like to say we're probably in it. And I want to be clear on this as well. It's very important to keep this tone of comfort, okay? 24-hour coverage does not mean we're hyping it. All right, we're actually running less commercials than we would if we were in the Today Show. So we're not even trying to make more money. We're not going for crazy ratings. Our primary purpose here is safety. Your safety, my safety, our family's safety, and I'm here to make sure to keep you educated, to keep you updated so that you know every element of this, okay? Flood watches are posted for Central Florida. What I think is particularly interesting here, let's just look, okay, this is the perfect caveat to some of the computer models. This is the GFS coming in. Okay, that's 00Z Thursday, okay? So timeline-wise, that's Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Let's watch. Let's bring it full and let's watch. That's Wednesday at 8 p.m. That's Thursday at 8 p.m. What, did it move 20 miles?
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot. Thank you for reminding me. I'm going to do it right now.
That's Friday at 8 p.m. Finally lifting into our area. So you're talking 48 hours of this thing. And then it's finally moving out, okay? So there's Saturday at 8 p.m. finally out of here. If that is the one model that really has us scratching our head. The GFS brings it ashore and stops it. So let's talk about rainfall here, okay? Let's talk about rain. This, truthfully, is a somewhat terrifying scenario if it were to stall, okay? Here's the rainfall numbers for the Tampa Bay area on the GFS model. And this is raw data, this is not a forecast. But if that plays out, 40 inches of rain, 37 inches of rain, this is not hype, I'm just showing you raw data. That would be terrible. Now that's one model. Let's look over to the European model. But even the European solution is showing 20 to 24 inches of rain for Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Okay? For us, some areas 14 inches, 16 inches at the villages for the European. What about the GFS? 9 inches on the GFS, but 15 at Orlando. So there's still some uncertainty about the overall kind of scenarios here. Timing is everything, right? I'm not a realtor. I do not have my real estate license, but it's location, 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 and timing is everything, right? That plays into more than just selling real estate, apparently. All right, let's see here. We're in the middle of the Atlantic, east of Bermuda on a cruise. We're curious if we will make it home Friday night. I mean, this should be lifting to the north, but I don't know what the seas are going to be, exactly. I don't know exactly where you are. You're east of Bermuda. You're going to circle around the storm. Will we be doing live throughout the day? How do we view you? I feel a comfort in getting your information while our daughter is at UCF. So I'll be popping on and doing updates with advisories, but we're just going to be doing the best that we can. That's about as much as I can tell you. I wish that I could be like, yeah, I'm going to be here or there, but we're doing TV, we're doing radio, we're doing all these different things, okay? So there's a lot of elements here. But this graphic now, I think, is one of the most important. That's why we're sitting on it, at least at the moment, is likely arrival of tropical storm force winds. Think of this as, when will it start where I live, okay? Does Wesh have a radio station we could tune into if we lose power? Yes. Our radio partner, Magic 107.7. Okay, Maggie, how can we forecast power outages? You can't necessarily forecast power outages, but I can say winds. That's obviously the biggest metric. But moreover, more than just winds, okay? We're also looking at the idea of we are particularly soggy. Okay, we are particularly soggy. We've seen a lot of rain here recently. The ground is wet. Those big oaks, oh man, with the wet soil, my biggest concern is them falling. I don't love that, okay? Any chance of storm surge in Ponce Inlet, Michelle's asking? The overall storm surge concern is not there in the Ponce Inlet. I'll show you. This is the storm surge watches and warnings. It does include Flagler County, because if you just figure, and this is going to be super rough, but if you've got the area of low pressure here, the counterclockwise flow, okay, would bring in a subtle surge, more for Flagler north than for Volusia. But if this for some reason stays further south, then we could be talking about a surge there. But boy, that is a terrible, nobody ever said that I was an artist. But that's kind of why I don't think Volusia is going to be a surge area, though Flagler, I think we'll probably start to see some water level rise there, okay? Does it make sense to drive down to Miami to be out of the path of the hurricane? Rodriguez, I would say if you have a need to leave, that's one thing. But to leave just to leave, I would say is a different thing. You don't want to clog the roads if you don't need to be, right? You want to stay as safe as you can. You want to keep the roads open to people that truthfully need it, okay? Tori, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Best way to entertain toddlers if we have a power outage. Danny, I could tell you that that's a big concern for me. What I would suggest, have your phone, any tablet charged, and then if you have a Netflix account, go and try and download Blippi and all the other things that are there. I don't know if Disney Plus allows for downloads. If not, use your cell phone and try and connect and do the YouTube thing. I have little ones as well. That is certainly my biggest concern. We tried to raise our children to be as independent of technologies as possible. So with or without power, they're still going to have their toys. My son has a lightsaber that he loves to bop his brother with. So, it's trying to make sure to be able to entertain. I know that's the biggest concern. And I would add, if for some reason you feel you and your family need to go to a shelter, they do not have activities for the families. So make sure if you're going to a shelter, that's a point of last resort, certainly. But if you're going to a shelter, do your best to bring things to entertain your children, because at the end of the day, that is a struggle. That is absolutely a struggle, okay? Let's see here. Lake County, my poor horses. I know. Yeah. Any advice for those on a barrier island in Melbourne Beach? Beth, thankfully this is not an East Coast storm, so for you this is not a big concern. This is a West Coast storm, so I would say storm surge, etc., more West Coast. For you, think of tropical storm conditions, which are equally as impactful, okay? Viviana, Eric, are you sure we don't need to board up windows? I don't know where, Viviana, you live, but I would say, West Coast folks, around the Tampa area, a little north, a little south, those are areas to board up. Crystal, thank you, Eric. Do you recommend my UF babies stay on campus or come home to Castleberry? I love how you still call them babies. I'm sure I'll do the same thing when my little ones get older. I would say if you're sure that they have food, right? Because a slight deviation could put them more into the impact area, whereas we're into the impact area. But, I would say if you know that they have food, not just the adult beverages at UF, but if you're sure that they can kind of sustain themselves for a couple of days, then they should be okay as long as they're allowed to stay. Gainesville's a little further to the north, thankfully, so hopefully the impacts at least will be lesser there. But I would always say if it makes you lay your head down tonight and be a bit more comfortable, then there's that, right? At the end of the day.
New models are coming in.
Oh, are they?
Trending northeast.
Oh, they are. Kellyanne with breaking information, pointing out that new computer models are coming in, trending a little more east. Yeah, look at that. It looks like we're focusing in from about Tampa to Charlotte Harbor, like Tampa Bay to Charlotte Harbor. It's so crazy how similar, and with that, it would take a very similar path to Charlie. Now, different storms are different, and it's very important to know that. This is not going to be Charlie because this is Ian. Ian's going to have its own impacts. But it's just crazy how we're fine-tuning and dialing this down to those specifics, right? Mickey, do you think that it could be stronger than forecast? It's certainly a possibility. Here's the intensity models. We do think that it's going to run into some wind shear. Okay, so we're in Cat 3 status now. Okay, it's a matter of, does it get any higher, does it get any lower, that kind of a thing, right? There are a couple of models that try to bring it to Cat 4 status. The thing that I'm curious about, and this is where that will play in, how much did Cuba interfere the core of the storm? We won't know that until it moves off. That's number one. Then number two, we're working out over the loop current in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so based on that, that was where Charlie rapidly intensified. Now, we're going to eventually be getting into wind shear, but, there are still, it's like our forecast is coming into focus, but there are still some of those things you don't know about, right? So that's kind of where we're trying, to dial in. Effects in Brevard should be tropical storm force, okay? I've been telling everyone it's so similar to Charlie. I felt off gut telling me it will come inland. Well, and Ashley, meteorologically, that made sense. And we've been talking about that for days. And I've been wanting to make sure to keep that open, to make sure. Danielle says, I was pregnant when Irma came through. My daughter is now 5. What do you tell your children about hurricanes to prepare them but not scare them? That is such a good question, Danielle. Such a good question. I find myself doing this yesterday. So my son is 4.5. We found out we were pregnant with him the day I moved into Wesh for Irma. So we're not all that far apart. The question was, what do you tell your children not to scare them? I think what it is you just tell them the weather's going to get noisy. It's just going to be a little noisy. My 4.5-year-old thinks that the angels, the people in his life that have passed on, he thinks that that's what the thunder is. And it's just such a beautifully innocent thing. And so, that's what we're telling him is just, that they're having a party. And it's not even a religious thing. It's just trying to help him process as best as he can. So it's just a matter of trying to make sure to keep them calm, because it's, we get storms every afternoon in Central Florida, and it gets loud. Tropical storms, hurricanes don't typically have a ton of thunder and a ton of lightning, but, the wind is going to get gusty at times. The rain is going to be coming down, buckets and buckets. And so I think that being as simple as we can, it's going to get loud outside. Yeah, they're just having a party. And it's okay. For my son, though, the difficulty is I am completely an absent parent right now. Last night, I was off of work. My wife was showering. I was watching the kids. We were watching Star Wars. And, and Eric was asking me questions as I'm on my phone trying to shoot out weather updates and things like that. It's tough because my kids don't see me at all, right? And so that's where it's kind of like I have to try to reinforce when I can that everything's okay. It's just it's going to be a little loud outside. But we have a safe house, we have a safe roof, and we're okay. That's why we live where we live. And if you live in a mobile home, then that's why we're going to Cousin Bob's house, because Cousin Bob has a safe house, or whatever the case may be. Okay? Gosh, it's such a heartbreaking question, but it's such a real question. So I really appreciate that. Let's see here. First responders are going to miss family as well. 100%. Brooke, my teenagers love this kind of weather, which made my 7-year-old love it. That's very cool. I see a lot of questions about boarding up. I think if we lived on the Gulf Coast, that would 100% be a thing. 100% Gulf Coast board up. In that cone, 100% board up. In our area, the concern goes down because of friction, but we could still be talking about hurricane force winds. Okay? during hurricane time, you're like a dad for everyone. Jay, thank you. We appreciate your dedication and sacrifices. Thank you very much. Best place to evacuate, Orlando or Gainesville? Jonathan's asking. I don't know where you are, Jonathan, but I would say you want to run from water, hide from wind, okay? So in this case, with this hurricane, unless you live right on the Gulf of Mexico, I wouldn't, or in a mobile home, that sort of a scenario, I wouldn't really be evacuating, honestly, because it's run from water, hide from wind, okay? Here's the deal, okay? Let's just look at storm surge, okay? I think that this is, thanks to meteorologist Alex Alisi, by the way, I need to fix some of these fonts, but other than that, it's a great graphic. So there's your family, okay? So storm surge, there's your family, okay? That I think clarifies what kind of storm surge we're talking about, right? 6 to 9 feet, that's above your head. 9 feet plus, that's above your head. So when we start looking at storm surge forecasts, you know, Tampa Bay area, and I don't see my brother Frank in here, and I chatted with him yesterday. He lives on Pinellas County, which has mandatory evacuations in place. But yeah, 6 feet and above. So areas in orange or red have the potential to have truly life-threatening, catastrophic storm surge. Now, we'll fine-tune this, but our gravest concern is going to be in the Tampa area, okay? Is losing the roof a possibility in Orlando? So Nelson, there's so much to that question. We find ourselves in the right front quadrant of this storm, which typically is the area that you find the highest likelihood for tornadoes. Tornado hits you, certainly that's a possibility. If you have a weaker roof, an older roof, it's a possibility. If you especially find yourself in an area with the higher wind gusts, it's a possibility. But losing your roof, you know, like completely peeling off, that likelihood comes down pretty significantly in our area. Gulf Coast area, that's a potential. Marissa said, my mom is in Hillsborough County and she and her roommate aren't leaving. Have mercy. Just make sure, Marissa, that they're, you know, where is their you know, are they in a floodplain? Are they in an evacuation zone? Are they in that sort of a thing, right? William says, Futurecast shows a quicker move than the stall. Any ideas on the stall? You know, that I think is the $1 million question with this storm system. And I think that the Hurricane Center is kind of splitting that difference, showing that storm system still over us, looking at Friday, 2 a.m. Yeah. Amy, we are a special needs family in Rockledge, Vieira, and may need medical attention. In your opinion, where would you recommend us go if we don't stay home? Well, I think staying home is the best you can do, right? If you're at a shelter, I believe shelters, there are special needs shelters that have nurses and things in the facility. You know, that's always an option. But, you know, that's definitely a case-by-case basis. I would call to see what the shelter options are if you don't feel safe home. But yeah, that's definitely one of those unique cases. Call the Emergency Operations Center or your county and get that information for sure. All right? How long do you have to shelter in the area without windows? We only have a hallway and a small bathroom. So what I would say, Natalie, is when the storm gets bad, we're going to be telling you. And you don't want to just sit there for hours and hours and hours. What I would say is if it starts to get a little louder outside, that's when you're going to want to go hide, right? If we're on the air for a tornado coverage, you're going to want to get inside, right? Those kinds of areas there. Jen, do you think Disney should close? I think Disney's doing the right thing, which is watching and gauging from there. Disney will not be open in a hurricane, okay? They close. I can recall it was such a big deal with Charlie that they closed. Such a big deal. When does Disney ever close? Well, they closed because there was a hurricane coming. Disney will not be open during a hurricane, at least the parks. Now remember, there are hotels, other hotels, that's a thing. And to that point, Harris Rosen, local hotelier, always does this. heavily discounting hotel rooms at all of his properties, from the luxury properties to the more moderate properties. If you need a place to stay, if you're evacuating to Central Florida, not going to a shelter, Rosen, and I mean, I will promote him and his properties night and day. They're not a sponsor. I'm not sitting here doing that, but because they're doing that, so heavily discounted, and certainly it's it's to the point where they're just trying to make it even so that they can pay their folks that are there as well. Can you show the new models again? Melissa's asking. Sure, and I'll show them with the cone as well for perspective. Okay, yeah, I think that we'll probably get a nudge to the right on that forecast cone at 11 o'clock when that forecast cone comes out. Okay, out of state parent of a UCF student, what kind of flooding would you expect around UCF? So the rainfall numbers were kind of, I think that the potential is there for major flooding rain. Okay, 6 to 10 inches with higher numbers. I am particularly concerned about that. All right. Wednesday, Thursday, likely flooding conditions across Central Florida. I'm particularly concerned about that. Not hype. I'm just being real with you. I swear I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that a Category 20 hurricane is coming. I'm going to be very real with you. We're going to look at the data. We're going to go over it together. Okay. Mimi says we are Zone A next to the water. We can't stay. No, I would not suggest staying. Certainly not. Rosen hotels are all booked. Tried to find a room last night. Interesting, Nikki. Okay, well, I'm sure that there are other facilities that are around. Hi, Eric. Here in New York City with lots of anxiety, worried about my offspring and winter garden. I mean, it's going to be a rough couple of days. It's going to be a rough couple of days. Should I be worried? No. I mean, as long as they're prepared. Preparation is key. All right. Aaron is asking, should we expect power outages in Polk County? Well, based on the current thinking, I would think so. I mean, Polk County, just look at the map here, okay? Polk County, peak wind potential, at least in the western part of the county, you're running 75, 85, 95 miles an hour. Peak winds, with perhaps even higher gusts. All right? Tornado risk is there. We've already seen several tornado warnings in South Florida and the Keys, and I would suspect that threat will be lifting into our area. Yeah. Serenity, should my sister come from Fort Myers to Port Orange? Only if there's a storm surge threat concern there, okay? Only if there's a storm surge concern. While we're talking, I'm going to pop this graphic back up. Likely arrival of tropical storm force winds. Think of this as when the storm is really going to be starting, okay? Let's see here. What category will the hurricane be when it hits? It's expecting to make landfall as a Category 3, and then as it moves in, weaken little by little by little, okay? Could you talk about what to expect in Jacksonville? I'm a senior at UNF, and this is my first time experiencing a storm without my parents around. They're in Tampa, so no sense in going home. Agreed. As a matter of fact, I'd almost say for them to come to you. Yeah, so for you, I would think tropical storm conditions. So cloudy skies, breezy conditions with gusty downpours, 30, 40 miles per hour. For you, just make sure that you've got enough food and water. Listen, if you're a senior at UNF, you could eat ramen noodles for days. So spend 50 cents and get a couple of days worth of ramen noodles and you'll be good to go. That's, I think, the most important thing. We just, in these scenarios, need to be able to support ourselves for a couple of days. That's all. Support yourself for a couple of days until restaurants are able to start opening, Publix, Winn-Dixie, etc. is able to start opening, that sort of thing, okay? All right, let's see here. I'm relatively new to the area, Nelson says. Yeah. How long do you think power can be out in Orlando? So the way that they do it is they prioritize based on, if I do this, I'm going to get the most number of people back on. If I do this, I'm going to get the most number of people back on. So that's the way to look at it, okay? If you're in a more rural area, Nelson, then it may take a little bit longer. If you're kind of in the city, it's impossible to predict because it depends on where the breaks are, right? But they try to prioritize their fixes based on how they can get the most bang for their buck at first, and then it'll kind of work back to normal, just spot fixing afterward, okay? It's kind of like a triage, like let's just make sure that it's good, then we can really get into the nitty gritty. Randy, should I expect flights to be canceled into MCO on Friday? Certainly in the morning, more than likely. Later in the day, we may be able to start getting things back to normal a bit, okay? Could you possibly tell me anything about the Gainesville area? Tropical storm force conditions, so winds 40, 45, 50 mile per hour gusts, very heavy rainfall. I think that overwhelmingly the flooding threat cannot be understated here. Flood watches are posted for the entirety of Central Florida. And you know, when we look at just the overall threats for us, flooding is absolutely on top. Flooding is my biggest concern, and that's one of those, people don't think about tropical systems and flooding. We learned quite that lesson with Hurricane Harvey over in Texas. And I'm not saying that this will be a Harvey, but I'm saying I'm at least concerned that there will be the threat of that level of impacts, okay? We are flying into Melbourne from the UK at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Do you think it will still go ahead? You know, it comes down to the decision by the airlines, right? They don't want to put an airplane in that they can't guarantee to get it back out safely. They don't want to have a hurricane hitting an airplane. So that's tough, Jameson. So I feel like so many people are flying, and certainly this is just normal commerce, but there's so many questions about flights, and I wish that I had better information. But it's airline dependent. But you know, I will tell you the same thing that I tell anybody when they're discussing my cruise, my this, my that. It's like, there's a hurricane hitting the state. Like, keep your expectations pretty loose here, right? Don't set yourself up for disappointment. Keep your expectations pretty loose. That's just the way it's going to be. All right? Will your updates be simulcast on the radio, Gina? At some point, yes, I believe that we will. Yeah. I'm sorry to ask, what category is it right now for Osceola County? So Joyce, I would say for Osceola County, you're probably into strong tropical storm force or low-end hurricane force, okay? Christy says it best, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Absolutely. All right. Carla, Seminole County Schools just announced they'll be closed through Friday. I was chatting with the superintendent earlier, and I'm actually going to be chatting with the principals of Seminole County Schools. I'm on a WebEx with them at 10:30. Don't let me forget that. Yeah, and that's a very responsible. The superintendent for Seminole County Schools, and I can only speak to her here, speak on her, I'm not even speaking on her behalf. I could just share with you, she is genuine, as I'm sure all the superintendents around Central Florida are, but Dr. Beeman is concerned with safety of her staff, concerned of safety of her students, and we have been in touch quite frequently, and it is absolutely my honor to work with her in Seminole County because these are decisions that keep families safe, and these are decisions that are widely felt, right? Okay. Any news for Okeechobee? Jessica down in Okeechobee, how are you? You know, it looks like the worst of the storm should stay north of you, but I would say tropical storm force impacts. Okay. Pat, you need a break. You are informed and helpful. You don't need to get sick. Well, I think that's always a concern. But you know, we're here. Listen. At the end of the day, I'm going to speak for Kellyanne and myself. We're exhausted. We've been working super long hours. But I think it's a testament to what WESH's mission is. It's a testament to where our heart is. We want to make sure to get as much information as we can to you, and we want to make sure to be able to deliver it in a completely level-headed mindset. No hype. Keep it comfortable. Keep it relaxed, okay? All right. That said, Intermediate advisory came in at 8. The next full advisory will be coming in at 11 o'clock. We will have it for you live, okay? And I will pop on here and update you whenever I can. I can't guarantee it's going to be an hour long, but I'll do my best. Okay? I will be posting model data and everything else, all right? Be the sunshine in someone else's day. Thank you so much for hanging out. Our live team coverage continues on WESH 2 right now. WESH 2 CW18. See you.